Hi, I'm Asmita Banerjee. We are back on this channel to talk about improving the quality of work in our cell culture labs and in labs in general. In this video, we are going to talk about scales and balances. We want to provide information which is not that easily found in the internet. So, what scales do you find in the lab? And what should you consider before you choose a particular scale? And what should you consider when you use one? First of all, what is the difference between a scale and a balance? While these two terms are often used interchangeably, a scale measures weight, whereas a balance measures mass. Usually, scales are rather used for larger amounts, and balances are used for weighing smaller amounts, but this distinction is not always clearly drawn. Therefore, we will use both terms and will not distinguish between them. For now, we will also forget about the different underlying operating principles and focus on what is important for weighing substances in a laboratory. Use the right one. Obviously, we cannot talk about all types of scales in the lab, but usually there are two types of them in most labs. For larger amounts, the regular scale, and for smaller amounts, the more sensitive precision balances or high-resolution balances. Make sure that you know the ranges of these scales and do not exceed them in any direction. Weighing too heavy or too light objects will result in incorrect readouts. The setup. Scales or balances have to be set up in clean, dust-free environments without vibrations and air drafts. So, do not put a scale beside a centrifuge, for example. The level has to be set correctly and the scale has to be kept spotlessly clean at all times. Now, we come to the how-to. Before you start, ask yourself the following questions. Which scales do you have in your lab? How much are you going to weigh? How accurate does your weighing need to be? Are you going to weigh back the remains? Into what kind of vessel or container are you going to weigh your substance in? So let's go through a typical weighing procedure on a precision balance. Check briefly if the level is set correctly. Switch on the scale. Make sure the glass doors are completely closed. Press tare and wait until the display shows 0.000 gram. You can skip this step, but I still always do it because it shows me if the balance displays stable values. Open the glass door, put your weighing boat on the scale, close the glass door, and press tare again. Wait until the display shows 0.000 gram again. Then open the glass door and weigh in the amount of the substances you want to weigh. Start with smaller amounts until you get a feeling of the weight of the substances. Then increase the amount until you come close to your required amount. Now, slow down a bit. Take smaller amounts until you reach the required amount. If you exceed that amount, remove as much as needed and discard that excess amount. Or, if you only have one single substance, you can also recalculate the volume in which you will dissolve the substance. But do not put it back into the original container. For reading the weighed amount, close the glass door each time, especially towards the end of the weighing process. Ignore the last digit on the display, meaning that you should only use it for rounding up or down your weighed amount. Open the glass door and remove the weighing boat and transfer the substance into whatever vessel you are using. Now you have three options. Discard the weighing boat. This is okay when you weigh larger amounts. In this case, a few milligrams that remain on the weighing boat can be neglected. But what if you have the situation that you need to dissolve and transfer this substance quantitatively into another vessel? In this case, transfer the substance into your container and rinse the weighing boat with the appropriate solvent into that container. By the way, you can also use this transfer method when you want to transfer the content of one container quantitatively into another. For example, transferring powdered medium. Now, if your weighing has to be really accurate, use the weighing back method. Before you start weighing, press tare Then weigh the tube, the weighing boat, or any other container. Then weigh in the amount of the substances you want to weigh. Transfer the substance and then put the tube, the weighing boat, or the container back on the balance. Close the glass door and wait until the value on the display settles. Note down that value and subtract it from the weighed amount. This will be very accurate weighing. You think you are done now? No, you're not. Take a soft brush and clean the balance. Close the glass door and wipe the area around the balance with water, disinfectant, or ethanol. What if you need to weigh a sterile substance that needs to stay sterile? Please keep in mind that putting a scale into a sterile workbench is neither recommended nor does it make a whole lot of sense. Why this is not a good idea will be discussed later in this video. But what options do we have here? Method 1. You can weigh in the substance without keeping it sterile, but afterwards dissolve it and then sterile filter it. This is a good method if that substance anyway needs to be solved and can be sterile filtered, meaning that the solved substance will not be held back by the filter material, the solvent and the filter are compatible, and the volume is large enough for filtration. For smaller volumes, as some of you already know from our course for cell culture, you need a minimum volume for filtration. Method 2. You weigh an empty tube that is sterile without opening the lid, for example, a centrifuge tube. Then you eyeball the amount that you will need into the tube in the sterile workbench. Close the tube while you are still working in the sterile workbench. Go to the balance and weigh your tube again, but this time with the substance inside the tube. This is only possible with substances that are more solid and not powdery, because with vertical airflow, your substance may be blown around, and even worse, it could be sucked into the ventilation system of the sterile workbench. Static problems. Sometimes you will have the problem that your substance and the tube are static. The powder will end up all over the place but the tube. You can try to use weighing paper instead. The paper is usually anti-static, or you use the weighing back method. You transfer the substance and then weigh the container back. If you weighed too much or too little, then you have to recalculate the volume of the solvent to get the right concentration at the end. If you, for example, want to prepare a solution of 100 milligrams per milliliter, but weighed 110 milligrams, then simply dissolve 110 milligrams in 1100 microliters instead of 1 milliliter to get a concentration of 100 milligrams per milliliter. Or if you, for example, with the weighing back method see that you only weighed 90 milligrams instead of 100 milligrams, then simply dissolve those 90 milligrams in 900 microliters instead of 1 milliliter, and you will have a final concentration of 100 milligrams per milliliter. You therefore obviously cannot use this method for a mixture of different substances. Now let's talk about common mistakes. One typical mistake is to use large scales for small amounts that have to be accurate. This is a really bad idea. Or, equally bad, weighing large amounts on a sensitive scale. Actually, this is even worse. As with this, you will probably damage the balance. But in both cases, your weighed amount will be completely wrong. Connected to that, you need to know the range of the scale or balance you're using. You will find that either on the scale or in the manual. Another common mistake is to take the last digit on the precision balance seriously. We mentioned that before. Use that digit only for rounding up or down the value on the display. Another mistake is to weigh substances which are not at room temperature. First, scales are calibrated to operate at room temperature, and apart from that, if you weigh something warm or even hot, the weight will be less. and it will increase as the object cools down gradually. If you weigh something that is colder than room temperature, your object will attract atmospheric humidity, which will condense at the surface of the object, again leading to wrong readouts. And finally, let's talk about another mistake or a rather questionable practice. Some people actually put a scale into the sterile workbench for weighing sterile substances. We do not recommend this at all. Let me tell you why. First of all, can you really disinfect a scale that meticulously that it is reasonably clean for being used in a sterile workbench? Second, if you do the disinfection really thoroughly, will you not actually damage the scale? Especially high precision balances are extremely sensitive and they are not meant to be soaked in disinfectant or ethanol. Next, how are you going to set the level? You will hardly be able to see it properly from top. Then the bottom floor of the sterile workbench is not suitable for a stable setup of a balance. It is neither stable nor is it level. Also, balances should be placed in vibration-free environments. How can you provide this while the sterile workbench is operating? If you find a manufacturer who provides balances that work perfectly well under these circumstances, then you can put the scale or the balance into your hood. But keep in mind that then the air inside the balance also has to be sterile. In all these years, if someone in our lab needed to weigh a sterile substance, we always found a solution for this without actually moving a balance into a sterile workbench. Let's all improve the quality of work in our labs and in science, and I will see you very soon.